Coming up today, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in South Korea for talks on President Park Geun-hye's upcoming trip to Washington, North Korea's nuclear threat, and other pending issues. North Korea neither denies nor confirms the execution of its defense chief Hyon Yong-chol in its first response to South Korea's recent announcement that Hyon was executed for showing disloyalty to Kim Jong-un. Plus, worrying developments in Iraq as Islamic State militants seize complete control of the key city of Ramadi. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, May 18th here in Seoul. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Seoul after arriving in the Korean capital on Sunday evening for a two-day visit. Kerry is scheduled to pay a courtesy call to President Park Geun-hye before holding talks with South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se later on this Monday. That will be followed by a joint press conference. The two top diplomats are expected to discuss the details of President Park's U.S. visit next month, as well as North Korea's nuclear and missile programs and other regional and global issues. Now, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon is also set to visit South Korea on this Monday. During his 5-day stay, he will attend the UN-led World Education Forum and meet President Park, senior officials and lawmakers. North Korea has given its first reaction to a South Korean intelligence agency report about the execution of North Korea's defense chief, Hyon Yong-chol, but the regime refrained from offering any hints about the validity of the claims. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
A fire shower for the South Korean leader. That was the threat issued by North Korea on Sunday if Seoul continues to offend its leadership. South Korea's National Intelligence Service said last Wednesday that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's closest aides, including Defense Chief Hyon Yong-chol, had been executed. It added that 70 senior officers had been removed since 2012 as part of the young leader's efforts to consolidate his power. Pyongyang's propaganda website 우리 민족끼리 claimed that Seoul was insulting its leadership with expressions like purge politique and fear politique, warning of a military strike if the insults continue. But the site stopped short of confirming or denying the report about the latest purges. North Korea's reaction to the report, its first, comes amid lingering doubts about the spy agency's conclusion. While the North state-run media typically deletes all records of removed officers, it has continued to show recorded footage featuring the defense minister, even in the period after he was supposedly executed. For example, an online search of North Korean media sites for Kim Jong-un's uncle Chang Song-taek, who was put to death in 2013, only brings up stories relating to his arrest, purge, and execution. But with Pyongyang slamming Seoul without giving a clear answer on the fate of the defense chief, some North Korea watchers say the reports about Hyun's execution are most likely true. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Joint anniversary celebrations to be organized by civic groups from the two Koreas are in jeopardy, as the two sides are having trouble narrowing their differences. The North state-run Korea Central News Agency reported that the main points of disagreement are the nature and location of the events. The civic groups have been discussing plans to commemorate two historic milestones, one event in June marking the 15th anniversary of a historic inter-Korean summit, and another in August marking the 70th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japan. It's been 5 years since the two Koreas commemorated the summit together. A city mayor in Japan who sparked an international backlash for his hardline statements about Japan's wartime sexual enslavement has announced his intention to walk away from politics following a defeat in a referendum on a city reform project. Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto said at a news conference on Sunday that he will keep his promise and resign from his post when his term ends in December, after the city voted against the referendum proposal to turn the city into a metropolis. The outspoken nationalist mayor made headlines around the world 2 years ago when he suggested that the Japanese imperial military's keeping of sex slaves during wartime was a military necessity. The referendum result is expected to deal a blow to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was throwing his weight behind the move for this referendum with the aim of winning Hashimoto's support in a drive to propose a national referendum to revise Japan's pacifist constitution. Back here in Korea, and a fire broke out on the side of a mountain near a government complex in Gwacheon, Gyeonggi-do province last night. The blaze started at around 10:20 p.m. on Sunday on the mountainside of Gwanaksan, searing some 5 square kilometers of land before being put out completely 3 hours later at around 1:15 a.m. this morning. 25 fire trucks and nearly 1,000 officials, including a great many firefighters, were dispatched to the scene. Fortunately, no casualties or injuries were reported. The authorities are investigating the exact cause of the fire. Now, the world of mobile payments is constantly evolving. Smartphone companies are developing their own mobile payment systems, and there are more mobile payment apps than ever before now. But now we've reached the next phase, which is virtual systems. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
Say goodbye to plastic credit cards. Local card companies can now issue mobile credit cards without having to issue a physical card first. The Financial Services Commission approved the change last month, adding a new dimension to the mobile payment landscape.
It costs roughly $14 to make and ship a plastic credit card, but a mobile card costs nothing. We hope this cost-cutting measure will benefit our clients.
To issue the virtual cards, the card company contacts the client and puts them through a process to verify their identity. To make a purchase, all the cardholder has to do is wave the phone in front of a card reader. It's convenient and easy to use. However, there are still a few drawbacks.
As credit cards move onto our smartphones, there are still lingering concerns about hacking and security.
And if the phone is lost, the cardholder is still responsible for all transactions made 60 days prior to the reported loss, regardless of who made the purchases. But perhaps the biggest deterrent is a low number of outlets that accept mobile payments of any kind. Of the 2.6 million registered shops or restaurants in Korea, only 50,000, or 1.8%, have mobile card readers. But with smartphones becoming a more prominent facet of our daily lives, experts believe that it's only a matter of time before the demand for mobile credit cards increases. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, foreign tourists to Vietnam who are already exempt from visa requirements will soon be allowed to stay in that country longer than before. The Vietnamese government has instructed police and relevant agencies to cooperate with the tourism ministry to let tourists from visa-exempted countries stay for 30 days instead of the current 15. The move is part of efforts to waive tourist visa requirements for countries with high tourism potential or those that have a strategic partnership with Vietnam. Now, before the change, visa-exempt tourists were allowed to stay for only 15 days per visit and had to wait for at least 30 days before coming back to the country. Now, currently, tourists from South Korea, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Japan and Russia are eligible for Vietnam's visa waiver policy. No word yet, though, on when the changes will come into effect. 24 Korean medical volunteers who recently served in Ebola-stricken Sierra Leone have been conferred medals in recognition of their dedication, hard work and contributions to elevating Korea's reputation around the world. For more on the challenges they faced, their courage and how they take pride in their service to their country, our Choi Sun reports.
When President Park Geun-hye announced her decision to deploy Korean medical workers to Ebola-hit West Africa last October, the administration initially faced questions about their safety. The three teams of a total of 24 medical workers were Korea's first emergency personnel sent overseas in response to an outbreak, and their safe return has bolstered the administration's confidence in the capabilities of Korea's medical community. In a meeting with the medical personnel at her office recently, President Park said she was impressed that so many of them had volunteered to be part of the team, despite the possibility of exposure to the deadly virus. Dr. Choi Young-mi was at high risk of Ebola infection after one of her fingers came into contact with an infected needle.
When the accident happened, instead of worrying about whether I would contract Ebola, I despaired at the thought of whether I'd be forced to leave Sierra Leone.
The team faced other challenges, including scorching heat during the day and having to work in shift through the night. But they said that receiving a show of appreciation from the locals and feeling like they'd made a contribution to the health of humanity and world peace made it all worthwhile.
The locals gave us a thumbs up, saying Korea after hearing about the work we did. They said Koreans work really hard and we became good friends.
The presidential office says Seoul will use the experience to bolster Korea's ability to counter an outbreak and seek more ways to play a role in providing international humanitarian aid in the future. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now, in a very worrying development, the key Iraqi city of Ramadi has fallen into the hands of the Islamic State group after Iraqi security forces downed their weapons and fled the city. Iraqi police and military forces pulled out, leaving behind equipment and weapons following a series of suicide bomb attacks over the weekend. Officials and security leaders say Islamic State have already started to carry out executions of people loyal to the government. Up until now, Ramadi, a city of around 500,000 people, was one of just a handful of places in Iraq's Anbar province that had managed to hold out against Islamic State. In response to the development, Iraq's Prime Minister has announced the mobilization of Shiite militias to try and retake the city. And U.S. Special Operations Forces have killed a senior Islamic State official and captured his wife after staging a ground raid in Syria. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter said the mission was originally an operation to capture Abu Saif, but about a dozen militants were killed, including the target. Now, the target himself, who is a Tunisian, was described as a fairly high-ranking commander by U.S. officials, but was not among the four most senior militants in Islamic State. Carter said Delta Force troops flew in from Iraq and touched down near eastern Syrian oil fields that the Islamic State group had tapped for black market fuel sales. Then they engaged in close combat against militants who actually used women and children as human shields. The Defense Secretary added that no American soldiers were killed or injured in the operation. The Korea Cup International Yacht Race is underway in waters east of Korea, and this year's event has a special meaning as it's held in the year marking the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan. But the highlight of the six-day event is the so-called Dokdo race, where sailors make their way around Korea's easternmost island. Our Connie Kim takes us there.
It's time for a yachting competition in Korea. Sailors from all four corners of the world have gathered in the eastern coastal city of Ulsan this weekend for the 8th Korea Cup International Yacht Race. Participants are competing in either of two races. The inshore race is a 2 to 4 kilometer course in waters around Ulsan. But the highlight of the event is the offshore course, also called the Dokdo race. On this course, sailors depart from Uljin, make their way to Ulleungdo Island and Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island, and then sail back to their departure point in Uljin. It's not an easy task, especially for first-time participants, but the sailors say it's all about the experience.
It's just the fact of being invited to Korea, to this exotic place for us, and participate on the regatta going to Dokdo Islands, just got my lights on and said, okay, let's go for it.
For the Korean sailors, participating in the race is something of a show of affection for the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island, which Japan claims as its territory.
I love yachts, I love the sea, and I love our Dokdo. I participate in this race every year in an effort to protect territory Dokdo.
17 yachts are competing in this offshore race dubbed Marathon on the Sea. They'll be sailing about 1,000 kilometers in just 60 hours. As the yachts made their turn around Dokdo on Sunday, a special ceremony was held to mark the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan in 1945.
Our aim is to promote Dokdo is our territory and let the world know about the beauty of the island through this sailing competition.
As long as Japan's claims to Dokdo continue, Korea's efforts to promote it as its own territory through this event will continue. Connie Kim, Arirang News, Ulleung.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Hope your week gets off to a great start, and thanks as always for tuning in. And we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.